You know it's this. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better. Put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 10th part of What If Naruto Enters Winxclub. Special note, this fanfic is written and a masterpiece of Pixel's Fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Magic Universe Magix. Underground Tunnels Alfea, Magix. Saturday morning. We once again find ourselves back in the Magix dimension, at Alfea where it was the morning of the next day and we see 3 people and an animal walking through the emergency underground tunnels. They were Bloom, Stella, Naruto, and Bloom's pet bunny, Kiko. Bloom had bandages on some parts of her body while also having some band-aids on her face. All 4 had expressions of defeat and depression, with a hint of anger somewhere there. They had been like this since last night back in Gardenia after what happened with the Trix and Bloom with her parents. They spent the night at the Peters residence to rest and to be sure that the Trix didn't return to finish the job, and they left Earth to return to Alfea to face the music per se. The trio walked down the tunnel until they reached the ladder leading to the Winx dorm. Being in front of the girls, Naruto was the one who opened the latch to the dorm and entered, with Stella and Bloom following quickly behind. Their entrance alerts Flora, who exits her shared room with a dazed expression, as she looks around for the source of what woke her up. Seeing as the main room was dark, she flicked the lights and saw the trio standing in front of her. Naruto, Bloom, Stella. You're back. Flora yells as she rushes to the trio and hugs them tightly. The nature fairy breaks the hug and looks at the red hair with an expression of relief. We were worried about you when you suddenly took off to the city like that. She says with a relieved smile. Sorry about that. Bloom says while showing a small smile. The commotion in the main area of the dorm causes Musa and Tekna to exit their room and see what is going on before seeing the trio and Flora together. Guys! You're back! Musa and Tekna yell while they run to them, both looking relieved to see the trio back and safe. Hi guys, I'm glad to be with you again. Bloom says, her small smile turning to a visible one as she was feeling a bit better to be back with her friends. Tekna notices the bandages and band-aids that were on Bloom and the lack of them on Stella and Naruto as she couldn't help but wonder what had happened. Bloom, what happened? Why are you covered in those bandages? Tekna asks, causing Bloom to flinch before she looks down to the ground, Naruto doing the same, but he has an angry expression as he clenches his fists while Stella, who was holding Kiko to her body, just looks at the others with a sad expression before she glances at Bloom. Girls, something happened to Bloom. Stella says in a seldom tone, something that catches the others off guard since they've never seen Stella like this. What? What happened? Musa asks, wanting to know just what happened to her friend for her to be not herself. That's what I would like to know as well. The 6 teens and Bunny nearly jump in fright at the sudden appearance of a newcomer as they turn to the door where they hear someone speak and they flinch at seeing Griselda, looking at them with a stern glare. And just where have you 3 been? She asks, narrowing her eyes at the 3. Naruto steps forward and he looks at her with a look of disappointment, sadness, and a hint of repressed anger. Auntie, we need to talk, something happened to Bloom. Something really bad. Naruto says, prompting the head of DSPLN to raise her eyebrow, wondering what was going on. 30 minutes later. Headmistress Office Alfea. In Faragonda's office, Bloom, Naruto, and Griselda were in the room with the headmistress herself and Griselda to hear what was going on. Bloom was sitting in a chair in front of Faragonda's desk while Naruto was leaning against the wall near the bookcase. Griselda poured some tea into a cup for Bloom as she sensed uneasiness from the red hair. She hands the cup to Bloom, who looks at her. "Here, this will calm you down," Griselda says. Bloom looks at the cup in front of her before she lets out a small smile and takes the cup. "Thank you." Bloom thanks the head of DSPLN, who nods at her, as she takes a sip of the cup. Griselda then walks over to Faragonda and stands next to her while Faragonda looks at Bloom. "Alright Bloom, what's going on? What happened yesterday for you to suddenly take off to Magix like that?" Faragonda asks. Bloom looks down to her lap as she tries to figure out what to say to her headmistress. "I had to go back to Gardenia, ma'am, the Trix, they had my family hostage," Bloom says, and this causes Faragonda and Griselda to look at her. "What?" Faragonda says, and Bloom continues. "They held my parents captive and said they'd kill them if I didn't come. So, I went back to and faced them, but they overwhelmed me and they nearly killed them. They then trapped me and, they..." Bloom was saying but stopped as her words couldn't come out. Faragonda and Griselda look at her with concern and worry, wondering why did Bloom stop speaking. "They did what?" Faragonda asks. But before Bloom could utter a word, Naruto beats her to it. "They took her magic essence," Naruto says, his eyes being shadowed by his bangs. This information makes Faragonda and Griselda look at Naruto with wide eyes. "What?" Faragonda says, hoping what she just heard was her ears playing tricks on her. "They took her magic essence?" Griselda asks. She starts looking at Bloom and tries to sense anything from her, and to her shock, she can barely feel any magic presence from her, and the same goes for Faragonda, who was doing the same thing. The two could sense something in Bloom, but it was dormant and they could barely feel it. It would explain how Bloom was able to enter Alfea since no magical beings could not due to the barrier. Bloom nods, confirming what Naruto had said as she continues to stare at her lap. "Yes, they took it, all of it, I'm not a fairy anymore," Bloom says, and tears begin to form in her eyes. "Oh, Bloom," Faragonda says, feeling sorry for the poor girl for having to go through something like that, but Bloom wasn't finished. "But, that's not all they did to me," Bloom says. "What else did they do?" Griselda asks. "Before they took my magic, they told me things about myself, who I am and where I came from. They know who I am," Bloom says, but stops as she remembers the moment the Trix told her the truth. Her eyes continue to well with tears as she grips her jeans tightly before she looks up at the two adults. I'm the last princess of Domino," she says, shocking Griselda while Faragonda just looks at Bloom. Meanwhile, Naruto's mind goes into overdrive upon hearing this as something has been bothering him for some time and he closes his eyes in thought. "What? You're the last princess of Domino?" Griselda asks and Bloom nods. "Yes, I'm the last living resident from Domino. And its long-lost princess, that's what Icy told me before they took my powers," Bloom says. Naruto was in deep thought over something before his eyes opened in shock as all the dots in it finally connect. "That's it!" Naruto shouts, startling the women in the room as they look at him and see he was snapping his fingers as if he had a realization. "That's why they were so obsessed with the dragon flame," he says. "What are you talking about, Naruto?" Griselda asks and Naruto looks at the three. "The night we sunk into Cloud Tower in search of Stella's ring, we were in the Trix's dorm looking for it when I came across their desk, filled with various items and information on the Great Dragon, from its earliest records to its final resting to the 12 items forted from its flames. At first, I didn't know what they were doing or why they were so obsessed with the Great Dragon, and I did my research to see if I could find anything for my own, but I didn't, that is until now. I now know what they were after all along," Naruto says as he looks at Bloom. "Bloom, I don't know how to tell you more softly, but, you're not just the princess of Domino, you're also the keeper of the Great Dragon Flame," he says as Bloom looks at him with a confused yet shocked expression. What? Bloom asks. You are the rightful keeper of the great dragon flame. Something that grants the user unimaginable powers and unlocks their full potential. It would explain why you had such a massive amount of magic reserves and why you entered that state whenever you were angry. It's a power so sought out that evil forces like the three ancient evil witches searched for their entire lives and failed to. Naruto was speaking but stopped as his mind went over what he said. The three evil witches of old, the great dragon flame, Domino, the Trix, Bloom. All those had a connection to one another, and he finally sees it as his eyes widen in utter horror from what he concluded. He turns to Bloom and looks at her. Bloom, you don't think that? He says. Bloom looks at him in confusion, wondering what he is on about before her eyes widen in shock, having come to the same conclusion he has. No, it can't be. Bloom utters, her worries and fears increased as she now understands why the Trix were after her. What? What's wrong? Griselda asks and Naruto looks at her. Granny, Auntie, I think the three witches could be descendants of the three wicked witches of old, and they've finished what their ancestors started. Naruto utters and Faragonda's and Griselda's eyes widen in shock. Oh no. Griselda utters, she had known only from the stories and tales of how deadly and how powerful the three evil witches were in their prime. If those three were descendants, that would spell disaster. Faragonda scolds her features as she thinks to herself. This is troubling news. Faragonda says that knowing this new information could only lead to tragedy. This is what I feared would happen. She mutters to herself, but Bloom can hear her and causes her to look at the headmistress. Wait, you knew? Bloom asks, causing everyone else to look at her, wondering what she was on about as Bloom just stares at Faragonda for a bit as she asks again. You knew? Faragonda doesn't look at her and just lowers her head to her desk and nods. Yes, I knew. Faragonda says. How long did you know? Bloom asks, feeling betrayed by Faragonda for keeping this from her while also feeling angry. After you began looking into Daphne the nymph. Faragonda says, and this sets Bloom off. And you didn't think about telling me this sooner? Bloom yells as she shoots up from her chair and slams her hands onto Faragonda's desk before glaring at her. You don't think you could have told me sooner what I had or who I am? She shouts as Faragonda just looks at her before letting out a sigh. Bloom, there are many things I could have done to tell you about who you are and what you possess, but if I did tell you earlier, you wouldn't have been able to process it fully and it would have led to disaster for you and your friends. You must trust me on this, it was for your good. Faragonda says. So you thought it would be okay for me to know from others? It wasn't your decision to make, this is my life we're talking here. Bloom yells, somehow her irises begin to glow orange in anger. She turns around and starts storming toward the door, leaving Faragonda and Griselda to look at her. Bloom, please. Calm down and sit. Faragonda tries to plead with Bloom, but the now last princess storms out of the room, leaving the occupants to reel from what happened. Naruto lets out a sigh, gaining the attention of the two professors as he looks at them. I'll go and calm her down. Naruto says. He walks over to the door and opens it to leave only to stop and turn back to the two. But you seriously need to apologize to her, Granny. Bloom has a right to know who she is and where she comes from. Like how I want to know who I am and where I came from. He says before exiting the room and closing the door behind. Faragonda and Griselda think about what had happened and think about what was said as Griselda looks at her longtime friend. You know he's right. She does have a right to know who she is. Griselda says, and Faragonda couldn't help but let out a sigh as she nods, seeing how her efforts in protecting Bloom had backfired on her. I know, and I will. Faragonda says, knowing she had to apologize to Bloom for her actions. Griselda on the other hand, was thinking about what the two said about the Trix. If what they said about those three expelled witches being descendants of the three evil witches. What could this mean for Magix? Griselda asks, she couldn't help but feel like something was brewing, a storm of chaos and destruction, something that has never been seen before since the final battle against the three evil witches. I don't know. Faragonda says as she stands up from her chair and looks out her window to the mountains, where Cloud Tower was located. But this doesn't sit well for Magix. She says, sensing something dark coming to the realm. Winx dorm, lounge. Alfea Magix. So, let me get this straight. You went back to Gardenia to go and face the Trix after they held your parents captive and they stole your magic. Tekna asks as Bloom nods. Bloom had returned to their dorm and had explained to the others what had happened to her the previous night, and to say that they were shocked would be an understatement. Yeah, that's the whole thing of it. Bloom says, she was sitting on the couch while hugging her legs, looking exhausted, and for the better word, withdrawn after everything that has happened to her for the past 24 hours. And you're a lost long princess from Domino? Musa asks, saying the one thing that stuck with her from hearing Bloom's story, and once again, Bloom nods her head. Yep, and Miss Faragonda knew all along. Bloom says, frowning a bit as she still feels betrayed by Faragonda for withholding the information from her. Flora, being the closest to Bloom, sees her frown and she moves over to the red hair and pulls her in for a hug. Oh, Bloom. Flora says as she rubs Bloom's head, like how a mother would soothe their child. I'm so sorry that had to happen to you. The nature fairy says, and Bloom just smiles a little before she returns the hug. Thanks, Flora, it means a lot to me. Bloom says, the two stay like this as the others were thinking about the situation. What are you going to do now, Bloom? Musa asks. This question causes Bloom to break the hug as she. It's just, I don't know what to do now, my powers are gone, the dragon flame is gone and in the hands of the Trix, and I can't do anything to stop them from whatever they're planning, I'm a mess. Bloom says as she flops back to the couch and stares at the ceiling in thought of everything she learned and transpired in the past 24 hours. Well, look on the bright side, you're a princess like me, so that's gotta mean something good, right? Stella says, trying to sound upbeat as the others look at her with flat looks. Stella. Tekna says Stella's name as if she was about to scold her for only pointing that out. What? I'm trying to lighten up the mood. Stella says with her hands raised. The others just continue to look at her with a flat expression as Flora turns to Bloom. What are you going to do now, Bloom? Flora asks, and Bloom doesn't say anything at first until she sighs and shakes her head. I have no idea, I just don't know. But I do know this, the entire magic universe is in jeopardy now that the Trix have the dragon flame. And there's nothing I can do, I've lost my powers, I'm not a fairy anymore, I'm just, me. Bloom says, sounding and looking crestfallen as the others look at her with saddened expressions, feeling pity for the now-known last princess of Domino. Oh, Bloom. The others thought. Do you need anything? I could make you some soothing chamomile tea. Flora offers, but Bloom just shakes her head, declining the offer. Or play you some calming music. Musa suggests, but once again, Bloom shakes her head. No, I just need some time to myself. Bloom says, looking like she did need time to, and the others could see this. Okay, Bloom, we understand. But if you need anything, we're here. Just ask us. Tekna says, and the others nod, agreeing with her. Bloom lets out a small smile, feeling appreciative of her friends and their kindness in her time of need. Thank you. Bloom says before she exits the dorm and walks onto the balcony outside their dorm. She watches the skies for a bit while rethinking everything that had happened. She lost her powers, she was a princess of a long-lost kingdom, she was the holder of an ancient but powerful source of energy that people used to use for evil intentions, and now, it was at the hands of three descendants of the three evil witches, and who knows what they could do with all that power. She sighs and slouches onto the railing of the balcony. She stays like this for a bit until something hits her on the head, causing her to snap out of her thoughts and look around to see what it is. Huh? She utters while looking around to see what hit her on the head, but sees nothing. What she wasn't seeing was a pair of arms lowering down from above her to her back and quickly grabbing onto her by her shoulders. This causes Bloom to get startled and see a pair of hands holding her. Huh? What? Before she could say anything further, she suddenly pulled up, prompting her to scream. Her scream alerts everyone else in the dorm as they come out to the balcony to investigate. Bloom? Is everything okay? Stella called out to the red-haired but was surprised to see she wasn't there. What the? The blonde says. Wait, where'd she go? Musa asks. She couldn't have left without us noticing, right? No, she couldn't have. Tekna says, knowing it's impossible to leave the dorm without transforming, and that was out of the question with Bloom. Then where is she? Stella asks. On the roof of Alfea, Bloom was being carried by someone who had their hand on her mouth as they were running over the roof towards a place. It isn't long until they stop and the person who kidnapped Bloom lets go of her and she regains her sense and moves away from her kidnapper, and throws a punch at them, connecting onto the person's chin. Bloom was about to throw another when. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Relax, Bloom, don't do it. Bloom stops and looks at who she just kidnapped her. And Naruto? Bloom stutters upon seeing the familiar blonde hair on that whiskered-faced teen. Yeah, it's me, sorry about that, Bloom, I had to get you up here as easily as possible and that was the only way I saw, so I couldn't let the opportunity pass. Naruto says but lets out a wince from the pain he was feeling from Bloom's punch. DMN, you got a serious right hook. He says as he rubs his sore chin. Sorry. Bloom stutters, feeling bad for punching him. It's fine, I deserved it for scaring you like that. Naruto says. So, what are you doing? Why did you drag me up here? Well, I was chilling up here, taking in some sunlight when I decided to come and check up on how you were doing, but I couldn't help but hear your conversation. Naruto says as Bloom looks at him with a surprised expression. You heard all of that? Bloom asks and Naruto just nods. Yeah, you guys aren't particularly quiet. Naruto says, while sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. Oh. Bloom says, looking down to the ground, feeling slightly embarrassed that Naruto had heard everything. She notices that the ground was pink and looks awfully like the roof. This causes her to look up and see that they were indeed on the roof, actually near one of the towers. Naruto, why are we on the roof? She asks and the blonde stops rubbing his chin and looks at her. Well, after hearing that felt that I should do something for you. Naruto says and Bloom looks at him confused. Do what exactly? Bloom asks and Naruto just smiles and taps onto the wall, causing a section of the wall to split, revealing a door. This surprises Bloom but Naruto just turns and walks through the door but stops to look over his shoulder at Bloom. Follow me. Naruto says, gesturing at her to follow before he walks into the tower. Okay. Bloom says with a raised eyebrow, curious about what Naruto wants to show her. She follows him up the stairs. They walk up the stairs for a bit until they reach the top of the stairs, where a locked latch is. Naruto opens the latch and goes through it, before he offers his hand to Bloom. Cautiously, Bloom takes his hand and is helped up to the top where he was and she sees just where they were as her eyes widen in shock. Wow! That was a reaction as she was looking at a glorious view of Magix, from the mountains in the background to seeing Magix, Cloud Tower, and Red Fountain in the distance. She was taken aback by the beauty of this sight. What is this place? She asks. This is one of the places I come to think or get away from everything and just look at the sunset. The view here is something else, especially during sunsets. I felt I should bring you to do something. Naruto says as he walks over to the railing of the top and sits on it. To do what? Bloom asks. She walks up and leans on the railing beside Naruto. Naruto doesn't say anything at first and looks at the view for a bit before he sighs and looks at her. To vent. To let it all out. Naruto says. So, go ahead. Vent. He says. Vent about? Bloom asks. Everything. Everything that you're bottling in. Let them out, Bloom. Trust me, it'll help. Naruto says and gestures to Bloom to go ahead. Bloom doesn't say anything at first as she was confused as to just what to say. I don't like how to even know what to think about anything anymore. Bloom says. Such as? Naruto asks, motioning Bloom to continue as the red hair takes a deep breath and begins speaking. It's like, ever since I came to Alfea, everything about my life had been flipped upside down from how I found out I was adopted to how I'm from a long-lost kingdom, which I'm the princess to, or how I had a very powerful source of energy, so powerful that evil forces came after me, hurt me and those I love just to get it from me, and now the entire magic universe is in danger because I wasn't strong enough to beat those DMN beaches when I had the chance and the power to do so. Or how one of the people I thought I could trust hid important info on my life from me under the gust that it was to protect me. It's my life we're talking about here, shouldn't I have a say in it? Can't I have a say in my life at all, universe? Can't I? Bloom says but shouts at the end as she pants from how frustrated and exhausted she was feeling from all that. She pants for a bit as Naruto looks at her. Do you feel better? Naruto asks and Bloom just hops onto the railing and sits on it, hugging her legs close while sitting beside Naruto. A little. Bloom mutters. So, what are you going to do now? Do you have a plan? Naruto asks, causing Bloom to sigh and shake her head. I have no idea, I just don't know what am I going to do about my life, the Trix, or how to get my powers back, I just don't know. Bloom says, she looks at the sky with a defeated expression, knowing she was stuck in a hard place and had no way out. Naruto hums in thought while looking up at the sky before he smiles and looks back at Bloom. I think I have an idea that could help you. Naruto says. Bloom hears this and can't help but scoff. Yeah, right. Bloom says with a scowl as she thinks Naruto was only saying this to cheer her up. No, really I do. Since I understand what you're going through. Naruto says and Bloom's scowl deepens as this annoys her. You have no idea what I'm going through, Naruto, no one does. Bloom mutters since she feels no one knows just what she is going through. Naruto looks at Bloom and sees her scowl and he sighs, knowing he has to make his point to her to listen. I do actually. I went through what you're going through the day after I woke up after crashing here and I had no memory of who I am. Naruto says, causing Bloom to drop her scowl and turn to him with a raised eyebrow. When I first woke up and realized I had no memory of who I am or where I came from, I was scared. I realized I was trapped in a universe where no one is like me, I'm stuck in a place where I have no one to relate to me. I didn't trust Granny, Auntie, or anyone from the staff at all, I kept them from me as much as I could. It got to the point where I escaped Alfea and I ran into the forest to hide away from everyone, but I got lost. I was scared, cold, and wet as I wandered the forests for who knows how long, and then I slipped and nearly fell off a cliff. I grabbed onto the ledge and started crying out for help to anyone who'd listen, but after some time, no one came and my hand was getting tired and it reached the point where I had to let go. I fell off the cliff, accepting my death when someone caught me in the air. I opened my eyes and it was Granny in her fairy form. Naruto says. Boom was shocked at just what happened to him on the day he woke up from losing his memories and how he nearly died if it wasn't for Faragonda saving him, and in her fairy form too. The wind starts blowing by and Naruto starts smiling at the memory of that day. She landed and started to check on me, to see if I was alright, and she said she and the others were worried about me and how they were looking for me for all that time. It was at that point, I realized, I was wrong in not trusting them. They saved my life twice and they did it because they are good people. I broke down crying there and just hugged Granny, thanking her for saving my life. she just hugged back and said it was no problem. After consoling me for what felt like forever, we went back to Alfea and met up with the rest of the staff. They were worried sick about disappearing like that, and I apologized for that. After that day, they took me in and started teaching me the basics, and how to defend myself from magic. Over time, I started seeing them as not just my saviors, but as a family. My precious people. The ones I would die for if meant to save their lives. Bloom, I know that your story may not have a happy beginning, but that doesn't make who you are, it's the rest of your story. It's who you choose to be. I choose to be Naruto Uzumaki. A mechanic, a swordsman, a student of Alfea, and a friend and fellow member of the WinxClub. Someone who wants to help those in need, and to get his memories back. He says with a satisfied smile. He turns to Bloom and looks at her. So, who will you choose to be? Someone who's stuck on a past she has no connection to, or the person who's always been the one I like? He asks. This surprises Bloom as she wasn't expecting that question, but it does make her think. Naruto said. Who would she be? She thinks about the question for a bit, trying to see who would she want to be. She looks up to the sky and closes her eyes as she takes in a deep breath. I choose to be, Bloom Peterson, and I choose, the person I've always been, one who loves her family, her friends and helps those in need. And, I want to be someone who wants to know who and where she came from. Bloom says, with determination in her tone, something declaring to the world, and herself that she would remain the same person and know who she is. Naruto looks at her and smiles. That's the Bloom I know. Naruto says. Glad to have you back, Bloom. He says, and Bloom looks at him with a small smile. Yeah, it's good to be back to my senses. Thank you, Naruto, for being here and helping me get back to my senses. Bloom says, feeling thankful to the blonde, but he just waves her off. It was no problem, I'm always happy to help my friends in need. Naruto says, with a big bright smile on his face while his eyes are closed as the wind blows by. Bloom looks at him and a blush appears on her cheeks. She feels her heart flatter. She thinks about him and remembers he always puts others above himself, how he's always been there for her and the others and been nice to everyone. She found that admirable and cute. He's someone she wants to be, someone she wants to be with. So, taking in a shakily deep breath, Bloom exhales and decides to speak about her feelings, right here and now. And Naruto. Bloom stutters, calling the blonde as he turns to her. Yeah, what's up? Naruto asks. There's something I want to tell you. Something important. Bloom says, and this catches Naruto's interest. Yeah. What it is? Naruto asks. We're friends, right? Bloom asks. Yeah, of course, we're friends. Why do you ask? Naruto asks with a raised eyebrow. Well, what if we could be more than just friends? Bloom asks, her blush intensifies as she looks away. Naruto too gains a blush on his face while looking at the red hair. Like how? Naruto stutters. Bloom just turns back to Naruto and looks at him in the eyes. The thing is, I like Bloom was saying but stopped upon sensing a massive pulse of darkness crossing through Alfea. And it wasn't just her who felt the pulse, everyone else in Alfea, the students of Red Fountain, and those in Magix felt the pulse of darkness hit the realm. Did you feel that? Naruto asks and Bloom nods. Yeah, what was that? Bloom asks, wondering what was that pulse. However, before she could continue thinking about the pulse, dark clouds began to form in the clear sky, blocking all of the sunlight as our duo sat up and saw the clouds gather above Alfea before rain suddenly started pouring down. Rain? The red-haired asks, holding her hand out to the rain and feeling it. The forecast said that there wasn't going to be any rain in 3 weeks, so, what's going on? Naruto says, looking at the clouds in confusion. However, his confusion fades away upon him sensing something in the forest approaching Alfea, fast and in large numbers. Bloom, we need to your dorm. Naruto says, causing Bloom to turn to him. What? Why? Bloom asks. I'm sensing something just in the forest, approaching Alfea. Something big in large numbers, we need to go, now. Naruto says with a serious expression. Bloom sees his expression and realizes he was serious, so she nods and the two leave the tower and start running across the roof while looking down below to see the other students trying to get inside from the rain. What's happening? Bloom asks, wondering what was going on. I don't know, but I'm getting you back to your dorm so you can be safe. Naruto says as they run. Suddenly, Naruto senses the dark pulse from moments ago increase, as if it had an increase in power. What's it that I'm sensing? He asks himself, wondering just what was happening. The two make it back to Winx's dorm as Naruto lowers Bloom down to the balcony while he remains on the roof. Stay here Bloom, you'll be safe. He says and Bloom looks up at him. What are you going to do? Bloom asks as Naruto turns to the forest and frowns. I'm going into the forest to see what's going on. Naruto says. Are you sure a good idea? You have no idea where's out there. Bloom says, with concern in her tone. But the blonde just gives her a bright smile, waving off her concern. Relax Bloomy Bloom, I'll be back before you even know it. Naruto yells before he runs towards the edge of the roof and leaps off it upon reaching it. He drops and lands on the ground before breaking into a sprint toward the wall around Alfea and leaps over it as he runs into the forest. Bloom, meanwhile, just enters her dorm while everyone else is by the window, watching what is going on as they hear the balcony door open and turn to see her entering the dorm. Bloom, where were you? We were planning to look for you when we couldn't find you. Flora says as she and the other look at Bloom with concerned expressions. I needed my alone time and I got some help from someone important and I feel better thanks to them. Bloom says with a blush forming on her face, remembering how Naruto helped her and how she nearly confessed to him. You got better? Musa asks, surprised to hear this, considering that Bloom was out of it not too long ago. The red hair nods. Yep, feel a lot better than I did a few minutes ago. Bloom says. That's good to hear. Flora says. Do you know what's going on, Bloom? Tekna asks and Bloom shakes her head. No, I don't. Naruto said he sensed something in the forest and went to go and investigate what was going on. Bloom says, with a concerned expression. However, what she just said alerts the others as they turn to her slowly. Wait, you were with Naruto? Stella says and Bloom looks at the others and nods. Ah, yes. Bloom says as Flora and Musa's eyebrows twitch a little. And he was helping you? Flora asks, with a strained tone in her voice. Alone? Musa asks, speaking in the same strained tone Flora used. Together. The two say together while giving Bloom a stern glance. Ah. Bloom doesn't know what to say really and was feeling a bit unnerved by the glances Flora and Muse are throwing at her. She looks back at the window and takes a step back upon seeing something crawling up onto the glass. Guys, I think we have a bigger problem right now. She says. Everyone sees her take a step back while looking at the window with a frightened look as they look back at the window to see what is going on, only to see a mass army of small creatures that are 8 feet and wavy, almost having the appearance of a scorpion. Stella sees this and instantly gets disgusted at the sight in front of her to the point where she screeches and fires a blast of light magic at the window, destroying it and killing the scorpion-like creatures. She takes a few steps back in fear for her phobia. Sorry, natural reflex. Stella apologizes for destroying the window. However, before anyone can say anything about it, more of the scorpion-like creatures begin to enter their dorm, causing the girls to panic. Flora instantly turned to their table, where Pumpkin Myrtle was, and could see from the pumpkin's eyes, that she was terrified by this. The nature fairy chanted and cast a protection shield spell onto Myrta, to protect her against anything for the next 48 hours. Suddenly, the door opens and the girls turn to see Professor Paladuim at the door with an urgent expression. "Everyone, we need to evacuate the building now, we are under attack," Professor Paladuim yells. The girls all run out of the dorm and follow Paladuim outside of the school and into the courtyard where they see everyone else panicking, trying to get away from the scorpion-like creatures or trying to kill them. "They're everywhere," Stella yells. "This is a total invasion, we have to fight back," Tekna yells. Musa feels something crawling onto her foot and she looks down to see one of the scorpion-like creatures trying to climb up onto her leg. She lifts her leg, making the scorpion-like creature fall back to the ground before she stomps onto it, killing it. "Yeah, let's send the little bastards back where they came from," Musa yells, adding pressure onto her foot to make sure the creature is dead. "Right." The other yell, agreeing with Musa, but Bloom gains a depressed expression. "But, I can't help you guys fight these things," Bloom says, feeling horrible on not being able to help fight these things. The others see and understand her as Stella walks up to the red hair and places her onto Bloom's shoulder calmly. "Don't worry Bloom, we'll take care of them for you too," Stella says, with a smile, assuring her that they had this. Bloom sees this and takes in a deep breath before exhaling and nods. "Okay. Go on, fight these things. Good luck girls, and be safe," Bloom says, and the other smiles before nods. "Thanks, Bloom. You too," Musa says as she steps forward and turns to the others. "Okay girl, let's send these bugs to their makers," she yells while punching her fist into her hand. The others nod with determined expressions. Magic Winx. The four yell and disappear in a bright light as the flash stays for a little before fading away, revealing the four had transformed into their fairy forms. The four fly up into the air to go and battle the scorpion-like creatures as Bloom watches them leave before she looks down at Kiko. "Come Kiko, let's get to safety," Bloom says as Kiko nods and they run to somewhere safe. The Winx and the other students, who also transformed into their fairy forms, were battling against this army of darkness with their various magic spells. Stella was by the entrance of Alfea with her ring of Solaria in its scepter mode as she spun it in the air, gathering her magic with it for an attack. Sun Wave. Stella yells as she spins the scepter and slams it onto the ground, firing a wave of light magic in the form of a wave at the army, destroying a large section of the army. In the air, Musa was gathering magic in her hands for a spell as she saw a bunch of scorpion-like creatures surrounding a bunch of third years. Acting fast, she flies over to the third years and aims just above them. Disco Barrage. Musa yells before she fires her spell just above the third years and her spell forms a disco ball suspended in the air. The disco ball spins as it fires a barrage of light blasts at the scorpion-like creatures, destroying them, and freeing the trapped third years who thanked Musa and transformed into their fairy forms to join in the fight. Flora was also seen flying around in the air, trapping and destroying the scorpion-like creatures when she saw a fellow student was about to get attacked by a monster with an oval face made out of the scorpion-like creature. Its mouth had 8 tentacles as if resembling jellyfish and had the appearance of an android. As the monster lifts its arms to slam down at the student, Flora flies over and conjures up her magic for a spell. Venus Earth Trap. Flora yells, she fires a magical blast onto the ground underneath the monster which results in a Venus fly trap-like plant being summoned and chump the monster in one go before retreating into the earth. Back with Bloom and Kiko, Bloom had grabbed a broom from the nearest closet and broken it to create a makeshift bat. She was using it to swat away the scorpion-like creatures while Kiko was hopping/stomping onto the creatures' heads, killing them. Kiko was about to hop in the air to stomp on a few more scorpion-like creatures when he was suddenly grabbed by one of the creatures, causing him to let out a high-pitched squeak, alerting Bloom, who turned and saw what was happening. Kiko. Bloom yells as she rushes toward Kiko and leaps in the air to stomp on the creature that is holding her pet. Leave my bunny alone. She yells while swinging her makeshift bat, striking the creatures and freeing Kiko. She bends down and grabs Kiko before she holds him close to her. "I may be powerless, but I'm far from useless," she says, happy she saved her companion. But before this can continue, something emerges on Bloom's left and she turns around to see a giant creature, glancing down at her. "Oh!" she utters before she finds herself dodging and running from the creature as it tries to smash her. Meanwhile, Musa was busy blasting some of the scorpion-like and large creatures with sonic-based magic. What she wasn't aware of was that a large creature was forming behind her. Musa notices a shadow casting over her and she turns around to see what was going on to freeze at the sight of the large creature. Her eyes widen as a vision of a Minotro appears in her eyes. Tekna sees Musa frozen in place with the large creature raises its arm, attempting to slam it down at the musical fairy. Acting fast, Tekna flies towards Musa. "Musa!" Tekna yells, flying towards her friend at a high speed while conjuring her magic for a spell. She forms something in her hands and glares at the creature. "DG Bomb!" The tech fairy yells as she throws a green magic construct in the form of a circuit component at the creature. The component clasps onto the creature's head and beeps for a few moments before exploding, taking the upper half of the creature's body. The lower half of the creature's body falls backward as the scorpion-like creature drops around on the ground and Musa falls to the ground on her knees. Tekna sees this and lands over before landing near Musa and sees her shaking. "You alright, Musa?" the tech-savvy fairy asks while Musa was still shaking. "Why yeah, I'm fine, TT thanks Tekna." Musa stutters, her tone and breathing was uneven as she shakes. "Are you sure you're alright?" Tekna asks, seeing Musa's current condition and was worried. Musa calms her breathing down before turning to Tekna and flashing a grateful smile. "Why yeah, I just need to catch my breath is all," Musa says. This didn't convince Tekna but decided to just let it go, for now. "Okay, I'll leave you to it. Just be more careful, okay?" Tekna says. She turns around and flies away. However, Musa starts breathing unevenly again while she looks at her right hand, to see it is shaking. "What just happened to me? Why did I see that?" Musa asks, as she holds her hands. Meanwhile, with Bloom, she was busy dodging/running away from the creature that was chasing her. She ran for a bit until she was cornered at a dead end. She sees a large shadow cast over her and she slowly turns around to see the large creature looming over her. Instincts take over Bloom as she grabs her make-staff bat and swings it at the creature's head, but the makeshift bat was broken at this action and the creature was unfazed. Bloom sees this and starts backing away until her back hits the wall. "Why you wouldn't harm a defenseless girl, would you?" Bloom asks with a frightened tone as she looks scared. She screams after seeing it raise its hand to attack her but a sword flies through the air and Light Sword Technique, Level 4. A very effective move against those of dark magic. Professor Paladuim says while his hands were glowing. He looks at Bloom and smiles. "I'll teach you that next year," he says before turning around and runs to the courtyard to assist in the fight. Bloom looks at the courtyard and sees him and the other professors were fighting the creatures while some were helping some injured students. The professors. Bloom yells, relieved to see them there, maybe now they have a chance to fight against this invasion. But suddenly. Boom! What the? Bloom yells, feeling the ground shake while hearing an explosion. She looks up and sees a large cloud of smoke and dust coursing up from a section of the forest. "That's coming from the forest," she says. She was confused by what happened, wondering about what could have caused this until she realized who could have caused the explosion. "Naruto," she utters with concern in her tone and heart. Hoping he was doing all right. Time travel just 2 minutes ago. With Naruto. Naruto was having his own set of issues. He sent flying across a section of the forest before slamming right into the side of a tree and sliding down, landing on his butt as he groans from the pain. He groans while standing up, rubbing his head as blood trails down his forehead. "That hurts." Naruto mutters from the pain. He hears some commotion and he looks up and sees a massive amount of creatures, the same ones that were attacking Alfea, approaching him. "Great, more of you," he says before sighing, knowing he was going to be tired and a bit sore after this. He looks around and sees his sword stabbed into the ground in front of him. He looks back at the creatures and spits out from blood from his mouth as he glares at them. "Okay, you want to throw down? Let's get it on, 'cause I'll take you all on," he yells before charging toward the creatures. He grabs his sword along the way and lifts it, causing the engravings on the blade to glow. He throws his sword at the creatures as the blade spins in the air, soaring. And when it reaches one of the creatures, it slashes it across the chest, making the creature let out a sound of pain while the sword bounces off it and back into the air. Naruto sees his sword spinning in the air and leaps in the air towards it. He grabs it and flips in the air before landing onto the ground as he starts slashing at the creatures, striking and cutting them at their arms, legs, chests and even taking off some heads in the attack. He continues to do this for some bit, taking out some while others were regenerating from the injuries they sustained from the attacks as Naruto sees this and frowns, deciding now to up his game. He lifts it above his head with the wind engraving glowing brightly as wind starts to emit around him. Wind art, razor's edge. Naruto yells, slashing his sword at the creatures, with a massive gush of pressurized wind pushed through the area, causing most of the creatures to fly back. The scorpion-like creatures were thrown back, colliding into boulders and trees, getting destroyed while most of the larger creatures to fly back and crash through some trees but were still intact before they got back up and started advancing towards him. Naruto sees this and grit his teeth in frustration as he lifts his sword to his face before he flicks it with his fingers, causing the black steel to shake and vibrate while another engraving began to glow. Earth art, spike game. Naruto yells as he downs his sword down to the ground, hitting it, and this makes the earth in the area shake before cracking and becoming uprooted as spikes form and speed towards the creatures, with the spikes impaling most of them while the earth continues to uproots, forming cracks in the earth which the remaining creatures fall into. Seeing this, Naruto decides to end this as he lifts his blade above his head with one more engraving on the steel beginning to glow as sparks and steam emit from it before a flame sparks to life on it. Flame art, dragon's pierce. He yells, swinging the sword down, and a massive arc made from red-orange flames shoot out from the swing, traveling towards the remaining creature as the arc collides with them, resulting in them getting vaporized by the flames, and a massive explosion kicks off, causing a massive cloud of dust and smoke course up as the trees and plant life in the area of the explosion begin to burn. Naruto let out a sigh of exhaustion as he pants from all that action, but was relieved that it was over. He turned around and was about to go to another section when he heard a snap behind him. He turned around to see what was happening, only to be shocked to see a large new amount of scorpion-like and large creature emerge from deep within the forest. "You've got to be kidding me, these guys seriously can't be this stubborn," Naruto utters, in disbelief that more enemies were coming. He sighs and turns back to face them again. He then looks at his sword and his eyes widen at something he is seeing. "Great, I'm running out of juice here," he says, seeing the engravings blinking, indicating that it was running out of its stored magical reserves. He looks at it closely and sees the blinking wasn't dimmed, meaning he had enough left in the tank. "I think I have enough of one massive combo, guess now's a good time to try it out," he says as he looks back at the creatures and notices all of them are together. He knows he had one shot at this and he needs to take it now. So, he closes his eyes and concentrates. Flame art. Naruto says as the fire engraving begins to glow, resulting in his sword to spark into flames. Wind art. He says, and the wind begins to pick up around him and his sword as the dried leaves begin to burn away. And earth art. He says, with his sword beginning to vibrate. He opens his eyes and looks at the creatures. He starts spinning his sword in place, feeling the intense heat coming from it while hearing the metal vibrate, waiting for him to strike, but he just spins it. he stopped spinning his katana, to where he was holding it in a reverse grip, pointing down to the ground. Elemental art combo, lava eruption. He yells before he stabs his katana down into the earth. At first, nothing seemed to happen, that was before the earth once again got uproots, but unlike last time, it was heated to the point that it was molten magma and the magma was traveling toward the creatures at a high speed. The magma collides with the creatures, causing them to scream in pain as they are being burned alive by the molten rocks. Naruto watches this, knowing that there is no way these creatures could escape from this and it is only a matter of time until they die from their burns. That should do it. Naruto says, letting out a sigh while dropping to his knees, from the exhaustion he was feeling. Man, Frank was right, keeping your concentration on your own swordman style while fighting is hard. He says, chuckling a little. Naruto then looks around and sees the burning section of the forest thanks to his dragon pierce and the magma. Floras kill me if I left the place like this. He says. Naruto then looks at his katana to see how much magic reserves it has left and looks at the blinking engravings. Enough of 2 more. He says as he starts up and lifts the sword in front of him, he closes his eyes as one of the engravings starts to emit a blue glow. The raindrops around him freeze in the air before starting to move toward him in a flowing motion before it moves around him in a circle. Naruto then starts spinning his sword for a bit with both hands as the water around moves and expands along with his spins before he stops, once again holding it in a reverse grip, pointing down to the ground. Water art, whirlpool flow. He says as he lowers the sword to the ground and taps the tip of the blade onto the earth, this causes the collected water around him to expand and shoot out in a whirlpool motion, hitting all the burning trees and molten rocks around as stream courses off the burnt bark and cooled magma. Naruto looks around and nods to himself at a job well done. That should do it. Now, to get back to the fight. He says before leaping off to go and fight any more creatures still lingering in the forest. The battle continues not just at Alfea, but also at Red Fountain where the students were batting against the creatures with their weapons. Over in Faragonda's office, she was speaking to Saladin over holocall, discussing the current situation at hand. This is bad, Saladin. Alfea is under attack by these creatures, and they're injuring the students. Faragonda says as Saladin on the holocall nods. Yes, the situation here at Red Fountain is the same if not worse. They've already caused severe damage to the building and from the reports I've been gathering, the entire Magix dimension is in the same trouble we are facing. Saladin says. This troubles Faragonda as she frowns. This is troubling news. Faragonda says, with her hands near her face. Just then, Griselda storms into the room with a frantic expression. They've swarmed the East Wing, and are heading to our labs. Griselda yells, this causes Faragonda to shoot up from her seat with a serious expression. I must go, Saladin, I have to go and assist my girls. Faragonda says and Saladin nods since he understands. So must I. I need to go and help my boys. Saladin says, cutting the call as Faragonda looks at Griselda. Come, Griselda, let's go and help our students. Faragonda shouts as Griselda nods and the two rush out of the office to assist in the fight. The fighting continued for nearly 2 hours as we cut over to Cloud Tower which had the same monsters that were attacking Magix, Alfea, and Red Foundation but for some unknown reason, these creatures weren't attacking the school. We move over to the top of the school and we see Icy, Darcy, and Stormy, all looking over the chaos that was happening over Magix with glee expressions. Look at all those fairies, specialists, and all those citizens in the city, running around like headless chickens. Darcy says, with a big grin on her face. Such destruction, such chaos. Oh, how I love it. Stormy says, she too had a massive grin on her face as she was losing all this chaos that was happening. Icy nods, agreeing with her sisters. Yes, sisters. Now is the time we fulfill our ancestors' ambitions and take over. Icy says as her eyes glow, allowing the power of the dragon flame they stole from Bloom. She uses the power on the creatures, causing them around Magix to stop before turning around and begin walking/fly to Cloud Tower, causing much confusion from those in Alfea and Red Fountain. Let's call back the Army of Decay, it's time for Magix to hear our demands. She says, getting ready to prepare the demands they'll make to the higher powers of the Magix dimension. It looks like things for our heroes are about to get much more difficult. Faragonda's office, Alfea, Magix. Saturday evening. A few hours have passed since the unexpected attack on Magix occurred from the hands of Icy, Darcy, and Stormy. The Trix and Magix were still reeling in the effects of the attack. The city sustained heavy damage and several casualties from the Army of Decay as there was no defense in the city for such a situation. Red Fountain suffered damage to its building, but the students and teachers fought hard against the army. Alfea was the only one who sustained less damage due to the impressive teamwork the students and teachers showcased against the Army of Decay. The only part of Alfea that sustained damage was a section of the forest surrounding the school due to one of Naruto's attacks. Cloud Tower's status was yet unknown due to the lack of communication from the head witch. Currently, we find ourselves in Faragonda's office where the headmistress herself was sitting by her desk, looking at something. But she wasn't the only one in the room. Griselda was also there, but also was Saladin. They were watching a recording from Icy, who sent it out to all the higher-ups in Magix, showing who was responsible for this attack and why. Your pathetic magic schools will cease to exist. We have supreme power, the likes you've never seen, and we will stop at nothing to obtain full control over the magic dimension. The attack that just happened was only a glimpse of our strength. If you don't want to perish by our hand, you have 12 hours to comply with our demands or face total annihilation. Resistance is futile. The projection of Icy says, her eyes eerily glowing as she seemingly glares at them. The recording ends and everything in the office goes silent as the occupants process the demands of the Trix. They're completely insane. Faragonda says after a while as Saladin nods in agreement. Yes, those three witches are exactly like their ancestors. Saladin says, remembering how deranged the three evil witches were back in his young years. Faragonda turns to Saladin. Except that their ancestors could never obtain the power of the great dragon flame, something they have now at their disposal. Faragonda says with a frown. Her words were heavy due to them being true. With the dragon flame, the Trix have ascended levels of power the likes of Magix have never seen. And if the previous battle said anything, this was only the beginning. Saladin nods, his thoughts on the same process as he looks at the headmistress of Alfea. We'll have to work together if we have any hope of defeating those three. Saladin says, realizing if they had any chance of saving Magix, they'd need to work together. Faragonda nods. Agreed. Faragonda says. I'll head back to Red Fountain and organize a defense strategy. We have to act quickly. Every second we wait, the stronger those three become. Saladin says. Faragonda again nods as Saladin lifts his staff and chants a spell and he starts to emit a bright glow before disappearing. Agreed. Good luck, Saladin. Faragonda says just as Saladin had disappeared. She then turns to Griselda. Has any word come from Cloud Tower? She asks and her lifelong friend/vice headmistress shakes her head. No, still no message has come from them. Griselda says, and this makes Faragonda frown. I see. Faragonda says, placing her hands near her mouth as she thinks about the lack of communication from Cloud Tower, she hopes everything was alright with Griffin and her students with what has been going on. What will we do in the meantime? Griselda asks. Faragonda doesn't say anything but just closes her eyes as she thinks about their next move. They couldn't sit around, waiting for the next wave to come, they had to do something about the Trix and their power. She opens her eyes, an idea comes to mind. We'll do a plan for our own. Faragonda says as she turns to Griselda. Call Bloom, Flora, Musa, Stella, Tekna, and Naruto to my office. It's time we devise a plan. She says with a serious expression, and Griselda nods before she turns and leaves the office to find the 6 mentioned. 10 minutes later. 10 minutes passed and the female members of the WinxClub were in the office with Faragonda and Griselda. The only male member of the club wasn't there as Griselda couldn't find him, but they'll look for him after this meeting. Thank you for coming, girls, at such short notice. Faragonda says as she looks at the 5 girls present. We are in a dire situation. She says. What's wrong, headmistress? Tekna asks as Faragonda sighs. The 3 witches, the ones who've been terrorizing against you all for most of the year, are planning an attack against us. Faragonda says, with a frown. Hearing this, the girls were surprised as they finally found out what, or rather who had been responsible for all this. They're doing what their ancestors did. Back then, the 3 evil witches seriously threatened Magix's balance of power in search of the great dragon flames. Fortunately, they never found it and died before they could get close to it. But now, their descendants have taken their ambitions and this time around, have obtained the dragon flame, granting them unimaginable power. She says as the girls process this information. Now fully understand why they were after the dragon flame for so long. Faragonda looks at Bloom with a serious expression. Bloom, at this point, we can hold out for so long, but to ensure that we have a chance in defeating these witches, we need you to go back to Domino. She says, catching the girl by surprise. To Domino? But why? Bloom asks, confused about the request. Because, according to legend, Domino was the final resting place of the great dragon, and it was the 3 evil witches who destroyed your home, your kingdom. And Icy, Darcy, and Stormy will soon follow in their footsteps, but this time, they'll destroy everything. Faragonda says. She walks in front of the girls and conjures a magical construct in the air as it displays an image of Domino, a currently frozen wasteland. I'm thinking, perhaps, somewhere in the reminiscences of the royal palace, you might be able to find a clue. A shred of evidence, something that can help you reclaim what was stolen from you, the dragon flame. Bloom, you're our only hope in winning this battle. Will you do this, Bloom? The headmistress asks, looking at Bloom. Hearing this, Bloom fidgets in place nervously as she looks down at her feet. But, I don't know, I mean, all of this is my fault. The Trix tricked me, stole my power, and now are using it to wreak havoc on Magix. I'm powerless, no longer a fairy, just me, I don't think I can do this. Bloom says, sounding and looking unsure of herself. Her confidence had seriously been shot after the Trix stole her powers, and how she couldn't help during the first initial attack on Magix. She could barely defend herself before she needed help. She felt that she might mess this up and let everyone down. Seeing Bloom hesitate, the others look at one another for a bit before turning back to Bloom. Then let us come with you, Bloom. Musa says. This catches Bloom's attention as she looks at Musa and the others in surprise and sees them smiling at her. Yes, we'll gladly come along with you. Flora says, flashing a gentle smile as Stella looks at her. That way, you'll have backup whenever something might happen. Really? Bloom asks, not believing they were willing to come along on this mission with her, but she sees the others. Just go over to her and wrap her into a group hug. Yes, we're not just roommates, and we're more than just friends. We're the WinxClub. We'll always stick together, no matter what comes our way. Tekna says, with a smile. Hearing this, Bloom couldn't help but get emotional as tears began to well in her eyes as she wrapped her arms around the girls, returning the hug. Thanks, girls. Bloom says. I hate to be that person and ruin this moment, but just how are we supposed to get to Domino? It's on the other side of the dimension and there isn't any INTN that will take us directly to Domino. It'll take a day to get there even if we use the fastest ship available. Tekna explains, knowing well as she had her DG pad out and looked up the last known location Domino was recorded. However, someone knew about this beforehand and grins as they heard Tekna. I've got the solution to that issue, my tech-savvy friend. The occupants in the room hear someone speak and they turn to the source. They see Faragonda's bookshelf open up and Naruto walks through it, in his mechanic outfit and was covered in grease stains and dirt as he wipes his hands with a cloth. Sorry I'm late, I had to recalibrate some of the circuits so they don't blow up during the transdimensional warp. He says, as he finishes wiping his hands and puts the cloth in his pocket. Naruto, where were you? And why are you covered in grease and dirt? Bloom asks, seeing the state their friend was in. I was busy rigging something for us. Naruto says, gaining the attention of the girls while Faragona and Griselda look at him with knowing looks. Rigging what up? Tekna asks as Naruto looks at her and smiles. A way to get us to Domino fast. Naruto says before he turns to the other. Girls, go pack some food and some emergency supplies. After that, meet me at the simulation room in 20 minutes. We don't have time to waste. He says as he turns around and was about to process leaving the room through the bookshelf, Stella stops him when she speaks. Wait. What do you mean pack supplies and warm PJs? Stella asks, confused by what was Naruto talking about. Naruto looks back at her and the others. Like I said, a way for us to get to Domino fast. Look, I'll explain when we get there. Naruto says. He looks back at the bookshelf and pulls a book, causing the bookshelf to split open, revealing the tunnel, and walks through it before he turns back around at the occupants in the room and looks at them. I'll see you all there. That's all he says before the bookshelf closes and everyone is left in the room to process the information passed from him to them. Well, you heard him girls. Go to your dorms and pack the necessary gear. We'll see you at the simulation room. Faragonda says, hearing this, the girls start leaving the room to head back to their dorms to get ready. Back in the office, Griselda looks at her lifelong friend. Do you think they'll be able to get to the castle on Domino, let alone find a clue there? Griselda says, and at first, Faragonda does not say anything for a bit before she sighs and looks at her oldest friend. Let's have faith in them, Griselda, for as of this moment, the fate of Magix lies in their hands. Faragonda says, letting the words sink in, knowing that the fate of Magix did lay in the hands of 6 teenagers. Simulation room, Alfea, Magix. 20 minutes later. After about 20 minutes, we find ourselves in Alfea's simulation room, where the Winx were inside the simulation chamber while Faragonda, Griselda, and Paladuim, who was busy at the controls. The Winx had backpacks strapped to their backs. Paladuim was adjusting a few controls and buttons on the machine's control panel before he looked at the teens in the chamber. Alright students, are you all ready to go? Paladuim asks as Bloom looks around the chamber. Sorry to ask this now, but why are we here, Professor? Bloom asks the question that was on the minds of those unaware of what was happening while Naruto just grins. Naruto and I were busy modifying the simulation systems and in a few moments, those modifications will cause the simulator to create a multidimensional pathway, one that will take you all directly to Domino. Paladuim explains says as everyone now realizes why Naruto was late to the meeting and why he was covered in grease and dirt. The professor then presses a button and suddenly, 6 balls of light appear in the chamber and float to the teens before stopping just above their heads. The teens look at the ball as the ball of light release a pulse of magical energy which washes over the teens' bodies as their outfits change into new ones. The girls all now wore a dark blue coat with a hood and white fur around the hood, dark blue pants, and knee-high black boots. They also had on dark blue gloves and a pair of orange-lensed goggles. Naruto's outfit was different than the girls'. His outfit consisted of a black thick winter coat with orange lines on the sleeves and chest which also had a hood attached, orange pants, and black climbing boots which had retractable spikes on the soles. He also had a pair of black gloves and a pair of black-lensed goggles as well. There was something else strapped to him on his back, it was a scabbard where his sword was sheathed. Seeing that the teens were ready, Paladoim looked over the controls for one more time before seeing everything was ready as he looked back at the teens. Now I do have to say this. Everything you will face there is real, it's not a simulation. So just relax, clear your minds and stay together, because we don't know what would happen if you got separated from each other. Understand? Paladoim says, and the teens all nod, understanding his words. Yes, sir. The teens say. Seeing them understanding, Paladoim nods and looks at Faragonda, waiting for her order to get things started, and she nods. He then goes back to the controls and flicks some buttons, and inside the chamber begins to emit a light. Intonating multidimensional trans rap sequence in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Paladoim counts down before his finger hovers over a red button. Ignition. He says as he presses the button, and the chamber lights up in a bright flash which consumes the entire chamber before it fades and the teens vanishes. Paladoim checks over the control panels to see if everything has gone accordingly, and to his relief, he sees all systems were green. The multidimensional pathway was a success, they're on their way to Domino. He says. Faragonda and Griselda let out sighs of relief hearing this. It's all up to them now. Griselda says as Faragonda nods. Agreed. Faragonda says. Paladoim turns to them and looks at them. I hope you have a way to bring them back. Paladoim says, causing the two to look at him with confusion. Why? Faragonda asks. Because, all the modifications Naruto and I did to the simulator were enough to create a one-way multidimensional pathway, but not a way back. At the exact moment they step foot onto Domino, they'll be stranded there with no way back. Paladoim explains. Hearing this, Faragonda and Griselda were shocked to learn that their students were now stranded on a deserted planet. I see. Faragonda says after a while as she closes her eyes and thinks of something for a bit before she opens them and looks at Paladoim and Griselda. I'll go and arrange a pickup for our students. Let's just hope they'll find an answer before then. She says and turns to leave the room to go and do the arrangements with Griselda following her not too soon. After. Paladoim looks back at the control panel and sees that the multidimensional pathway had faded away, indicating that the teens had made it to Domino safe and sound. Good luck children, you'll need it. Paladoim says, knowing that the journey will be rough. With the Winx. Domino, Magix. We shift our focus onto the Winx as we see they were on the surface of a frozen terrain. Looks like we made it. Naruto says as he bends down and picks up some snow from the floor, feeling it in his hand and knowing this was the real deal. So, this is Domino. Bloom utters as she looks around the frozen surroundings, seeing what was her true home, her kingdom. Everything's covered in ice and snow. She says, looking at the frozen terrain with a mixed sense of familiarity and sadness. I'll say, it's freezing. Stella says, holding herself as she feels the freezing wind blow into her face. So, where should we go? Flora asks. I say, we head that way, over by those mountains. Tekna says as she has a digital map displayed on a wristband. She was looking at the map and saw just where they were, not too far from the castle but still far enough it'd take a while to get there. She looks up to the sky and sees how dark it was getting. Since we don't have much time on our hands, we've got to hurry before it gets dark. I don't want to be out here in the open for whatever is out there when it does get dark. She says, everyone else looks at the sky and sees how dark it was getting and realizes that they are low on time. Good idea. The others say before they set off, in search of the royal castle. The 6 teens start walking in a direction toward the mountains as they battle through the extreme cold. They walked over various slopes and hills and at one point, they walked over an ice bridge that was seemingly suspended over a deep canyon. While walking on the ice bridge, Bloom slipped over some ice and started to lose her footing before she nearly went over the edge of the bridge, but fortunately, Musa was the closest one to her and manages to grab her at the last second and pulls Bloom back to safety, much to the relief and thanks for Bloom. After about 2 hours of walking, the group continued walking through the snow, as the cold and its effects were starting to get to some of them. I don't know how much longer I can keep going, I feel like I'll freeze over at any moment. Flora mutters, shivering a little bit as she was holding herself since her body isn't used to the cold climate. Let's keep going a bit further, just until we get a little closer to the castle, then we'll rest. Naruto says. How could things get any worse? Stella says, also holding herself. As if the universe was listening to her, heavy winds began to blow, causing everyone to use their arms as shields. Great, me and my big mouth. The Solarian princess mutters as a sweat drop appears. Nice going, Stella. Tecna says, now holding her arms up to her face to block the freezing winds. Sorry. Stella says. Suddenly, Flora holds her head, as if a headache was coming and attracts everyone's attention. Wait, something's not right here. Flora mutters. What's wrong, Flora? Is the cold getting to you? Bloom asks and the fairy of nature shakes her head. No, it's not the cold, I feel a shift with Mother Nature, she's not happy about something here and it's something bad. Flora says, still holding her head. Musa frowns as she listens to the wind. Yeah, the wind's not sounding right, it's like it's filled with anger. Musa says. Suddenly, everyone started feeling the ground begin to shake and they looked around to see what was happening and to their shock and horror, they saw a large cloud of ice and snow heading toward them. Oh no, a blizzard. Bloom yells, seeing the massive cloud heading towards them. The snow from the blizzard starts to hit them as the group just fights to stay standing against it, but they knew if they didn't do anything to get away from the blizzard, they were screwed. Transforming and flying through it was a no-go since Bloom couldn't transform and she and Naruto couldn't fly, plus even if the others were to carry them while flying through the blizzard, their wings would be damaged or worse, break. What are we going to do? Musa yells, seeing the blizzard was getting close. Naruto looks around and sees a cave nearby, realizing that the cave could be their salvation. Quick, to that cave, we can stay in there and wait out the blizzard. Let's go before things get worse. Naruto yells, alerting the girls as they turn back to him and see the mentioned cave. Looking back at the approaching blizzard, the girls realized that the cave was their safe option. So, the group started running towards the cave as the blizzard cloud was barreling behind them. Seeing the cloud was catching up with them, the teens picked up their pace and reached the cave just as the blizzard hit the front of it. Inside the cave, the teens were panting from all the running as they felt the strong winds enter the cave. Looking at the entrance of the cave, they could see the snow and winds of the blizzard start to form at the entrance. Quick, let's put a barrier spell so that the blizzard won't get into the cave. Stella yells as the other girls nod. Right. The other girls minus Bloom say as they look at the entrance of the cave and point their hands at it. Magic starts to gather around their palms as they aim and, barrier. They shout as they fire a ball of concentrated magic at the entrance as a glowing barrier forms at it and it starts blocking out the ice, snow, and wind from the blizzard. Seeing their barrier blocking out the blizzard, the Winx let out a sigh of relief. There, that'll hold for several hours or so. Meaning we're safe. Stella says, looking at the glowing barrier while Tecna sighs. But that also means we're stuck in here until the blizzard passes. Tecna says, knowing they were stuck. That doesn't matter, as long we're safe. Flora says, relief in her tone. So, what should we do while we wait for the blizzard to stop? Bloom asks. Naruto looks around the cave and sees it was big enough for them to rest, and maybe set up camp. Guess we can set up camp here in the cave and wait it out. Naruto says, and the others agree, seeing there was nothing else they could do while stuck in the cave. So, what should we do now? Stella asks as Naruto looks and sighs. Like I said, we wait out the storm and rest. Naruto says before he looks around the cave and sees a large opening where they can rest. Let's start up a fire and our tents over at that spot, there's plenty of space for all of us. He says, pointing at the spot. The others look at the spot. Nodding at the suggestion, the Winx move to where they take off their backpacks and pull out their supplies as they start setting up their tents. Saladin's office, Red Fountain, Magix. Night. Meanwhile, back in Magix. Back in Magix, things were relatively the same, the gloomy atmosphere caused by the Trix attack still loomed over Magix. However, our attention is brought to Red Fountain, where we see Saladin in his office, standing in front of a few surprising guests. I sincerely hope your presence here isn't another trick by those witches. Saladin says, glaring at an orc. To be precise, this orc happened to be the same orc Bloom, Stella, and Naruto faced on the first day they met. His name was Canute. No, it isn't. We came here alone seeking help. Canute says. And you heard that right, he wasn't alone. He had a small purple duckling sitting on his shoulder. This was the same duckling we saw on the night of the attack. Canute holds his hands together at Saladin in a pleading gesture. Can you help us, please? The orc asks, expressing fear. Saladin just looks at the orc for a bit, trying to see if he was deceiving him, but after seeing how frightened he and the duckling are, he realizes that they might be telling the truth. And why should I trust you? If I remember correctly from the reports, you've been the Trix's most loyal minion. Saladin says, knowing Canute's history with the Trix. I was, but now, they're dangerous. Deadlier than before. They've gone completely drunk from the power they stole and it's making them scary. Canute says. I see. Saladin says, realizing just how dangerous the Trix have become. As he thinks about this, a flash of light goes off behind the orc, alerting the occupants in the room as they look/turn around and see the Trix standing in the room as magical projections. I'm surprised, Saladin, I didn't you as a person who'd be speaking to traitors. Icy's magical projection says, sneering the last word as she shoots a dark glare at Canute and the duckling. You two will regret betraying us. I promise you that. Darcy's magical projection says, her eyes portraying dark thoughts on what she would do to the two once they got their hands on them. You think you'll be able to stop us, but you won't, for we are invincible. Stormy's magical projection yells with a manic smirk as all three begin laughing, as if what she said was the absolute truth. Saladin grits his teeth after hearing that, as it frustrates him. He grabs his staff tightly before he aims it at them. You DMN witches, you'll get what's coming to you. Saladin yells before he releases a massive pulse of magic at the projections, causing them to dissipate from the room, leaving Saladin, Canute, and the duckling alone in it. After a bit of silence, Saladin turns to Canute with a stern glance as he just asks him one question. Tell me everything you know. In the cave, Domino. Sunday. Back with the Winx. Meanwhile, back on Domino, morning rose on the frozen wasteland as the Winx were sleeping in their tents, the girls in their own while Naruto slept in his own while there was a campfire in between the two tents. The blonde unzips his tent from the inside and crawls out of it as he stretches his limbs. He looks over at the barrier and sees it was still active. Naruto moves towards the girls' tent as he taps on the tent. Hey girls, time to get up. Naruto says, yawning as he walks away from the tent and heads over to the campfire. The girl's tent unzips and Musa is the first to emerge from within it as she yawns while looking at Naruto. Morning, Naruto. Musa greets the blonde who waves at her. Morning, Musa. How'd you sleep? Naruto asks. Musa yawns while she crawls out of the tent, having slept in her winter gear as she sees Naruto summoning his katana and crouching down to the campfire. Cold and less comfortable than back at Alfea but manageable. You? Musa asks. Naruto uses a bit of his flame art to ignite the campfire as he lets the relit flame spark back to life before he stands up. Not too bad, I've slept in much worse situations before. Naruto says as he had fallen asleep in unusual spots in his cave, from either pulling all-nighters from working on engines, Akira, studying, or making ruins. I see. Musa says as she heads over to the fire to help Naruto with it. While they were getting the fire going, someone peeks their head from the girl's tent and sees the two near the fire. Morning Musa, Naruto. Naruto and Musa turn to the voice and see Flora peeking her head out, looking at them with a smile. Morning, Flora. The two greet the nature fairy. You guys getting the fire started? Flora asks and they nod as she crawls out of the tent and stands. Need any help? She asks. Naruto and Musa look at the fire and see it was starting to heat up as they shake their heads. Nah, we got this, but we could use some help getting the food ready to cook. Could you lend a hand for that? Musa asks and Flora gently smiles as she nods. Sure, no problem. Flora says as she goes back into their tents and pulls out some of their backpacks before she looks into them and takes out various food from them. She then sets the backpacks aside and goes over to the fire so they can cook breakfast. While they were cooking, Tenka woke up and crawled out of the tent, greeting the trio with the three greeting back as the tech-savvy fairy sat by the fire for warmth. While this was happening, Bloom had awoken and was busy trying to wake Stella and get her out of the tent. Come on, Stella. Time to get up. Bloom says as she tries to get Stella out of her sleeping bag while the Solarian princess groans, not wanting to get up. No, I don't wanna, 5 more minutes. A princess needs her beauty sleep before classes. Stella groans in her sleep as she thinks she was still back at Alfea as she tries to pull her sleeping bag back up to her so she can continue sleeping. Bloom looks at her with a deadpan expression as a sweat drop forms at the side of her head. Stella, we're not at Alfea, we're on Domino. Bloom says in a deadpan tone. Hearing that, Stella opened her eyes and looked around to see that they were still in the ice cave and not her room as she had thought. Oh, right, I forgot. Stella murmured softly, but it was loud enough for everyone to hear and they couldn't help but laugh. Eventually, Stella wakes up and the teens all sit by the campfire while having some breakfast. Afterward, they packed their tents and made their way to the cave's entrance where the girls' barrier was still activated. Seeing this, the girls cancel the barrier, letting it drop as they see the barrier has made a large and dense wall of snow at the entrance, blocking their only way out of the cave. Feels like the blizzard stopped. Flora says, using her nature sense ability to sense there was no disturbance outside. Musa walks over to the wall of snow and taps it with her hand, feeling how stiff it was as no snow was crumbling from it. Yeah, but we're trapped inside this cave by a wall of ice and snow. Musa says, making the others frown at the thought of being trapped. Meanwhile, Naruto snorts in amusement. Please, this is nothing. Step aside. Naruto says as he draws his sword, and the girls away from him. Staring at the wall in front of him, Naruto lifts his sword to be in front of him as he closes his eyes and goes into concentration. The fire and wind engravings on the blade begin to glow as the wind starts to circulate Naruto while his sword catches ablaze, melting snow around him. He inhales a deep breath as he opens his eyes before. Flame and wind art elemental combo, heatwave arc. He shouts and yells, swinging his sword in the air as an arc of heated air soars toward the wall as the snow on the floor instantly melts from the heat. The heated air reaches the wall of snow and collides against it before an explosion goes off, resulting in a mixture of cool and warm winds blowing over our heroes while debris of melting snow and ice flies all over the cave from the entrance. Due to the clashing winds, everyone was forced to close their eyes and wait for things to settle. Once they felt the rush of the winds finally settle, everyone opened their eyes and looked at the entrance, only to see the wall of snow had been blown away, with the cold winds from the outside. Naruto grins in seeing the wall had been taken care of as he spins his sword around before sheathing before he turns back to the girls. Shall we continue on our journey? He asks in a sophisticated tone, much to the girls' humor as they giggle. He, yes we shall. Right, girls? Bloom says and the others nod. The Winx exit the cave and resume their journey towards the royal castle. An hour passes and they continue walking along the deep snow, making it slightly difficult for them to walk as the cold winds were blow onto their faces, making the teens brace against it. Is it just me or did it get colder than before? Stella asks, slightly shivering as she holds herself for warmth. Guess that blizzard had a more lasting effect than just more snow and ice. Flora says. How much further until we get to the castle, Tecna? Naruto asks, turning to the tech-savvy fairy as she was looking at her data reader, the area's landscape, and trying to pinpoint where the castle could be. From these readings, we have a mile or two until we reach the last known location of the royal castle. Meaning we're close. Tecna says, seeing a map on her device. That's good to hear. Bloom says, feeling relieved to hear they were getting close to their destination. However, before anything else could be said or done, the ground suddenly starts to shake violently, alerting the teens. What's happening now? Musa yells as she and everyone else were fighting against the shaking for balance. Eventually, the shaking stops, leaving the teens to be relieved but confused. What was that all about? The musical fairy asks, wanting to know what just happened. Earthquake? An avalanche nearby maybe? Flora asks, but Naruto shakes his head. No, something like that doesn't happen in an instant. Something caused that, but what? Naruto says with a frown as he tries to figure out what was the cause of that shaking. However, the ground starts to shake again, just not as violently as before. The teens again fight for balance against the shaking. The shaking quickly stops unlike before, and this confuses the teens on why the shaking stops suddenly when Stella senses movement near her. She turns to where she was feeling this and her eyes widen in shock at what she was staring at. Guys, I think I know what caused that. Stella lowly says as she takes a step back with a frightened expression on her face. What, Stella? Bloom asks as she and everyone look at the Solarian princess and see she was taking steps back while having a frightened expression. Look! Stella screams before she points at something. Everyone turns to where Stella was pointing and their eyes widen in seeing something large emerge from what they thought was another snow-covered hill, only for that to not be true as it turned out to be a large white-furred yeti-like monster that had large tusks and ice spikes on its back. The monster looks down at the teens with its red eyes and it roars, causing the teens to take a step back in fear. Let's get out of here now. Bloom yells, prompting the others to run away while the monster again roars before it starts stomping after the teens. The teens continue running away from the Yeti monster while the monster was gradually gaining on them. Eventually, the monster had enough of chasing after the teens and it slammed its hands onto the ground, causing the ground to shake and all the snow that was around them to fall, forming an avalanche, one the teens saw, and before they could do anything about it, they were caught by it and were buried under a sheet of snow. Fortunately for our heroes, the snow wasn't thick and they were able to move out of the snow and get back to their feet. Seeing this, the monster lets out another roar and tries to swat them away, but Naruto quickly intervenes as he draws his sword and it ignites into flames. Flame art, Dragon Pierce. Naruto yells, swinging his blade and firing his attack at the monster's hands. The attack collides with the Yeti's hands, burning its palms as it roars from the pain while Naruto glares at it. Yo, Big Ugly. Why not pick on someone else? He shouts at the monster before he starts firing more fire-based attacks at the monster. The monster's hit by some of these attacks and roars as it starts swatting its hands down at Naruto, in the hopes of smashing him into the ground, but the blonde dodges these attempts. The girls were at the side but were separated, with Bloom and Stella on one side and Flora, Musa, and Tecna on the other, not too far from the battle as they saw Naruto was dodging the monster's attacks, but some of them were close calls and it looked like he was starting to struggle in evading it. He needs help. Bloom says, and Stella couldn't agree more. The Solarian princess stands forward and glares at the monster. Yeah, stay back, Bloom. Me and Naruto will deal with this ugly thing. Magic Winx. Stella yells before she disappears in a bright flash. Not long after, the flash dissipated and there stood Stella in her fairy form, ready to deliver a beatdown. That was until a gush of cold wind blew by and Stella immediately started to shiver. Oh, bad idea. Bad idea. She screams before she wraps her arms around the areas of exposed skin. Stella, are you okay? Bloom asks, seeing Stella shivering. No. My butt's freezing here. 1 second. Stella stutters, her teeth chattering from the intense cold she was experiencing. She quickly realizes that she needs to do something before she freezes to death. So, she gathers her magic and casts a spell. Change. She yells and once again, she disappears in a bright flash. The flash dissipated and Stella was different than she was mere moments ago. While she was the same, her outfit was different in a way. Most of it was the same, but she had on a white long-sleeve undershirt under her orange CRP top which had white fur at the wrists, covering all of her previously exposed skin, white long thighs which covered her thighs. There was white fur on the rim of her skirt, rim of her boots, and rim of her CRP top. Stella lets out a sigh of relief, feeling her body heating up and not freezing. There. Much better. She says before she looks at the monster and she glares at it. Now, let's see if you can take the heat. Sunbeam. She yells as she fires a beam of sunlight magic at the Yeti. The Yeti sees the beam heading towards it and it narrowly moves out of its path, but the light from the attack momentarily blinds it. Naruto sees this and takes the opportunity to attack. The wind engraving begins to profusely glow as the wind starts to pick up. Wind art, razor edge. Naruto yells before swinging his sword at the Yeti as arcs of pressurized wind soar toward it, cutting through the snow in the process as the attack collides with the Yeti, pushing it back while it roars from sharp pain. Everyone looks at it and sees Naruto has caused lacerations on its chest, with blood seeping from the wounds, and the blonde smiles at seeing his handiwork. Ha, how was that? You oversized furball. He yells at the beast. The Yeti-like monster's eyes turn red before letting out a loud vicious roar, prompting the teens to close their ears from it as the clouds in the sky darken. Snow and ice move around the monster as a pillar of ice starts to form next to it as our heroes see this and get a bad feeling from this action. Okay, I seriously don't like where this is going. Musa says. Before anything else could be said or done by them, the Yeti picks the ice pillar and throws it at them. Watch out! Stella yells and everyone leaps out of the way of the ice pillar as it crashes into the spot they were standing moments ago. The teens land not too far from where the pillar had hit as they sigh out for relief, but suddenly, the ground once again begins to shake with the teens finding themselves having to fight for their balance. However, as the ground shook, it began to break and split into two, with a crack forming in between the teens. The shaking got worse and the crack in between the teens grew larger, breaking them apart as most of them were on one side. Bloom was on the other side, completely alone. The ground underneath Bloom begins to break, alerting her and the others, and before anyone can do anything, the ground gives out and Bloom slips, falling into the crack. Bloom! Everyone yelled, shocked to see what had happened, but no. Naruto screams before he rushes over to the crack and dives right into it after Bloom, shocking everyone else with his action. Naruto! The others scream, seeing two of their friends disappear into the hole. Before any of them can jump right in and attempt to rescue them, the ground shakes again and the crack closes in on itself, rendering the girls' attempts to rescue Bloom and Naruto. As the girls were in shock after seeing their friend's supposed demise, a shadow casts over them. Flora was the first to notice and she turns, only for her to look up in shock and fear. Guys, we've still got problems. Flora says, drawing everyone else's attention. The others turn and see what Flora was looking at and see the Yeti monster looming behind them, staring down at them. It roars and raises its hands in the air before bringing them down to smash the girls. The four girls quickly react and leap out of the way as the Yeti misses them and smashes the crack, causing snow and ice to quickly fill up the crack and seal it up, where Bloom and Naruto were now trapped. The Frozen Kingdom of Domino, Magix. Sunday morning. Deep down at the bottom of the now sealed crack, we see snow falling onto the floor where various sized debris were lying covering/buried in it. Everything is still and silent when suddenly, the tip of a sword shoots out from under the snow as it moves away and we see Naruto had been buried under the snow. He pants a bit before he coughs a little as he calms down and looks around his surroundings, seeing he was in an icy cavern. "Where am I?" Naruto mutters, dazed from the fall as he shakes his head to clear away the cobwebs and stands up, knocking off most of the snow from his body before he continues looking around. He looks around until he remembers how he got to this place and who he was trying to save. "Bloom," he says, now looking for a sign of the redhead. "Bloom. Where are you?" he yells, hoping she could hear him. "Ah." Naruto heard a muffled groan that was coming not too far from him. He looked around for where that groan came from and he saw a gloved hand sticking out from under a bunch of snow. His eyes widen, as he realizes whose hand was sticking out. "Bloom." Naruto yells as he rushes over to where Bloom was buried and starts pushing the snow away from her. Not long later, he frees Bloom from the snow and gently helps her sit up. "Bloom, Bloom. Are you alright?" he asks, looking concerned at Bloom as she starts coughing. "Why yeah, I'm fine," Bloom says after calming her coughing, and Naruto feels relieved from hearing that. "Oh, that's a relief to hear," Naruto says. "Well, it's thanks to your quick thinking we're really lucky to come out from this not hurt. If you didn't stab your sword into the wall to slow us down, we would have been in a lot of pain right now," Bloom says with a small smile as Naruto helps her back to her feet. What Bloom was talking about was that after Naruto dived into the crack after her, he managed to catch up to her mid-fall and caught her as they continued to fall down the hole. While falling, Naruto maneuvers to the wall and stabs his sword into it, slowing down their speed before slipping from the wall and crashing down to the floor where they were. "Yeah," Naruto says as he looks around and realizes where they were. "So, we're at the bottom of a crevasse or an underground cavern, huh?" he says. "Yeah, we are," Bloom says as she drops her hood and pulls her goggles up to her head while Naruto also pulls his hood off, takes his goggles, and lets them hang around his neck. "We need to find a way out of here and get back with the others, they might need our help," she says, and Naruto nods. "Yeah," Naruto says before he lifts his sword and taps onto it and it catches ablaze, illuminating the craven. He moves his makeshift torch and spots a tunnel in front of them. He walks over to it and moves his sword, seeing it look like a path. "This could lead us to the way out. Come on, let's get moving," he says, turning to Bloom, who nods, and they walk into the tunnel, hoping it was the way out. Meanwhile, back at the surface, the Yeti roams around the frozen terrain while looking around, searching for the rest of the Winx who had vanished after they evaded his attack. While he continues to walk away, he doesn't notice someone peeking from a boulder behind him. The person peeking from the boulder sees it walk away before lowering their head back behind the boulder. "Okay, that beast is leaving," Stella says to the others who were with her behind the boulder. "So, now what? What could we do?" Flora asks, and Tekna punches her fists together. "I say we attack that thing now when it's least expecting. We do a surprise attack and take it out," Tenka says, with an enraged expression, taking everyone else by surprise. "Whoa, Tekna. What's going on?" Musa asks, wondering what was wrong with the tech-savvy fairy since she has never been one to express anger ever from the entire time they've known her. "What? That thing killed our friends and we have to avenge them by taking it out. It only fits in this situation," Tekna explains. "No, let's not," Flora says, causing everyone to look at her in shock or surprise. "What?" Tekna yells, looking at Flora as if she had two heads. "Why not?" she yells, wanting to know why they couldn't attack the Yeti monster. "You heard Stella, that thing is leaving. That means it thinks we're gone. Let's keep it that way. If we were to attack it now, it'll only provoke it and it'll try and kill us. And besides, we don't know if Bloom and Naruto are dead, they might have survived and are trapped in some cave. The best thing we can do is focus on finding them before something else happens. Flora explains, pointing out the cons if they did choose to attack the monster. The others thought about her explanation and realized she was telling the truth, but Tecna frowned. Yeah, Flora's right. If we did attack it now, we'd only wasting time. We came here for something related to the Great Dragon and Bloom's the only one who can contact it. We have to find them, I know they're still alive, I can feel it. Musa says, placing her hand on Tecna's shoulder, and flashes a reassuring smile. Tenka thinks about her and Flora's words and realizes they were telling the truth, seeing they couldn't get emotional now, not when the fate of Magix and the entire magic dimension was on the line. I see. Tecna says, after a while of not saying anything as she calms down and looks at the others before giving them a nod. Okay, let's go find them. I'm sorry for getting railed up like that, girls. She says. It's okay, Tecna. That happens to the best of us. Flora says with a smile as Stella nods. Yeah, it happens a lot. But DMN girl, we never seen you get railed up like that, even after you were trapped in the closet by Flora's plants. Stella says. Again, sorry about that. Flora says and Tecna waves her hand at her, dismissing the apology, but her expression changes to a bashful one. No, like I said, it's all good. No harm done. But, I guess after spending time with you guys, I've been able to learn how to express my emotions better. I've come to consider you guys, Bloom and Naruto, as my best friends, Tecna says as she rubs her arm with a small blush on her face. Everyone looks at Tecna with surprised expressions on their faces. They weren't expecting to hear or see Tecna express emotion like that, but they weren't upset by this at all. Wow, I wasn't expecting to hear something like that from you, Tecna. But thank you, I consider you and everyone else in the WinxClub as my best friends and I'm sure we all feel the same. Stella says with a smile as Musa and Flora nod with smiles on their faces hearing this. Tecna lets out a sigh she didn't know she was holding and was relieved to hear the others felt the same as she smiles as well. Thank you, girls. Tecna says. So, should we go and look for Bloom and Naruto or should we go and look for the castle? I say we try and look for Bloom and Naruto first, and when we find them then we can go and look for the royal castle. But how, thanks to that monster, the crack was sealed and we can't tell where it was. Whoa, girls, you might wanna see this. Musa says, drawing the others' attention as they turn to her and see she was staring at something. Following her line of sight, the others turn and see tall columns of ice in front of them with one in the middle being the largest in size and height. What are those? Tecna asks, wondering what was in front of them. Flora narrowed her eyes as she took a closer look at the columns and saw something was inside the ice, frozen in it, and saw it was a building of sorts. Those look like castle towers. Flora says, causing the others to look at the columns and see that froze inside of the ice, looked like to be castle towers. You don't think? Musa says, as everyone were thinking the same thing she was. Could those frozen towers be connected to the royal castle? Only one way to find out. Stella says as she raises her right hand and takes off her ring. Solaria. She yells before tossing the ring into the air, summoning her scepter and she catches it. Stella spins her scepter, conjuring magic to the base as she looks at the columns. Solarian light. The Solarian princess yells, swinging her scepter at one of the columns as a beam of hot bright magic is shot from her scepter. The beam hits the column and the ice starts to melt, revealing the tower. It's working. The ice is melting. Flora says, looking happy that their theory was right. Yeah, but the tower looks smaller than how most are. Musa says, looking at the tower and seeing how short it was. Tecna looks at the tower and sees how it was stuck in the snow. That's because the rest of it has been buried under the snow and ice. Tekna says. Hearing this, Stella stops her spell and once again starts spinning her scepter. That means the rest of the castle has to be right under our feet. Stella says. She spins her scepter a bit more before stopping and tapping the ground with it, sending a pulse of sun magic across the ice and snow, melting it away as they see a large castle frozen under their feet. Girls, we found Domino's royal castle. A few minutes ago. Back with Bloom and Naruto. Meanwhile, the duo of Bloom and Naruto were busy traversing through the tunnel, looking for a way out with Naruto's sword illuminating their way. Man, this tunnel is long. Naruto comments, as they've been walking for some time now. Bloom agrees by nodding her head. Yeah, I just hope that this at least leads us somewhere. Bloom says. They continue to walk for a while before Bloom notices something just in front of them to their left. Wait, what's that up ahead? She asks, gaining Naruto's attention as he looks ahead and sees what she is spotting. A way out maybe. Naruto says. The duo walked up to what they were seeing and stopped as they were in front of an opening, thinking it was another path in the tunnel, but to their surprise, it wasn't a path, it was a broken window that led to something. Wait, what the? The blonde says, looking surprised at seeing a hallway in front of them. This isn't a tunnel or even a cavern. It looks like a hallway. Bloom says. Let's go in, maybe there's a way out through here. Naruto says and Bloom agrees, so the two crawl through the broken window, carefully to not get cut by the glass as they were in the hallway, and look around, seeing all the interesting objects on the walls before they start walking down the hall. What is this place? Bloom says as they look around, taking in their surroundings and seeing the state these items were in as they enter a large room where a long table was located in the middle of the room, with plates, glasses, and utensils were spread across the table, all broken or rusted of course. Naruto looks around and sees damage to the room as if a battle took place here. I don't know, but this place was ravaged before getting covered by the ice. Look at the fire damage and all the damage in various spots around the room. Naruto says, pointing to the damage, and Bloom looks at it and can't help but agree with him. Yeah. Bloom says as she walks over to the table and runs her fingers across the wood. She does this before she closes her eyes and grabs her head. She hums, drawing Naruto's attention. What's wrong, Bloom? Naruto asks as he looks at Bloom and sees her grabbing her head like she was experiencing a headache as the redhead seemingly calms down and opens her eyes and has this confused frown on her face. I don't know. I have this strange feeling like I've been here before, I don't know why, but this place just feels familiar to me. Bloom says, wondering why she saw a vision of this room, but it was a lot better than how it was now in her mind. That left her confused. I see. Naruto says as he continues to walk around the room, looking over various items before he stops at a wall by a large double door and looks up as he sees something that catches his eyes, something that makes his eyes go wide in shock. Whoa, no way. He utters, but due to the size of the room, his voice echoes through the room and makes Bloom turn to him. What? What's wrong, Naruto? Bloom asks, looking at Naruto and seeing him looking at something with his mouth open. Bloom, you need to come over here and see this. Naruto says. Curious by Naruto's change, Bloom walks over to him to see what was going on with him and looks up and sees what he was looking at and her eyes widen in shock. Wah! Bloom utters, seeing something that utterly flipped her world. What the two were looking at was a burnt, worn-out portrait of a man and a woman. A man of tall stature with short brown hair, thin brown eyes, a small pointed beard, and tan skin, and a woman with a light skin tone, a tall and slender frame, long locks of curly red hair, and bright green eyes as they were standing in the portrait. The man wore an attire that consisted of a royal red bodysuit with large, open sleeves that ended with large fluffed cuffs. He had a large metal headpiece that expanded over his shoulders and opened up enough above his head to show off a large gold crown. There were 2 red spots in the shape of rounded diamonds on each side of the headpiece just over his ears. From the back of the headpiece rested the man's fur cape, which flowed down to the ground with a sizable amount that rested behind him. In front of the man's headpiece rested a large white cloth topped with an ornate golden collar with a symbol at the center of the collar containing a red and blue circle with a 4-pointed yellow star. The cloth was bound to his bodysuit by a large golden belt. The woman wore an attire that consisted of a long bright green dress with paler green and pink accents. Large green and pink shoulder blades were poking out from the sides as her green sleeves became large, puffy, and lighter in color around her elbows. Their buffs were bound to her wrist by 2 pink jewels. The torso of the dress consisted of a pink corset bodice with dark pinkish-purple patterns on the front, and the rest of the dress flowed from there and seemingly went past her feet. The woman also had a small gold necklace with a large pinkish-purple gemstone that matched the ones on her cuffs. Lastly, she had an elegant pale pink fur cape that flowed from behind her down to the ground as it curled inward. It also doubled as a boa of sorts as it splits off into 2 slimmer stands at the front that flow down to just above the queen's feet. The woman also had her hair in a large updo adorned with a ring of pearls and a 3-pointed crown with her bangs styled in long curled tendrils cascading down the sides of her face, neck, and back. She also wore light pink lipstick and faint green eyeshadow. I think that's the king and queen of Domino. And if this portrait is here, that would mean. Naruto says, drawing to a conclusion in his mind, and Bloom was also drawing the same conclusion. They were in the royal castle. This is the royal castle, this is my home, was my home, and they were my biological parents. Bloom utters, looking around the room, now realizing that this was part of her home, and seeing the state it was in, from the damage to the ice covering it, and she realized what, or rather who was responsible for all this. Tears begin to form in her eyes as she clenches her fists in anger. Her canines start to enlarge while her irises turn amber-orange before she closes her eyes. Why did the 3 evil witches have to come and attack my home? Why did they have to come and ruin my life? Why did this have to happen? Why? She shouts, slamming her fist against the wall, causing a small crack to form where she punches as tears begin to flow down her cheeks. She was about to punch the wall again when Naruto suddenly dropped his sword, grabbed her, and pulled her into a tight hug, stopping her from punching the wall again. Bloom. Calm down, just calm down, please. Naruto says, holding Bloom tightly as the girl shakes in his arms, trying to get away from him. He removes his arms from her body and places them on her face, making her look at him. Look at me, Bloom, just look at me. Remember what I said to you back at Alfea? Your story may not have a happy beginning, but that doesn't make who you are, it's the rest of your story. And you have the power to make things better. I know this, the others know this, and even your parents know this too. We're here for you, to help you, to protect you. We're here for you. He says, looking at her with a determined expression while wiping away her tears. Bloom sees this and can tell he means every word he says. So, she sniffs and nods her head. Yeah, you're right. Bloom says as she hugs Naruto, and he returns the hug while Bloom's features revert to normal. They stay like this for a bit, just holding onto each other before they let go of each other as Naruto looks at Bloom, once again placing his hands onto her cheeks, and looks at her while she looks at him. Feeling better? Naruto asks and Bloom nods. Yeah, I'm fine now. Thanks for cheering me up again. Sorry for getting upset like that. Bloom says, making her head look down at the floor, but Naruto wasn't having that as he moved her head, making her look back at him with a smile. Hey, it's fine, Bloom. While I understand why you got so frustrated, I do know what's it like to get. It sucks to see you all upset like that. So please, don't ever get upset, okay? Naruto asks, looking at her as Bloom looks at him and can't help but smile and nod, indicating that she agrees with him. Seeing this, Naruto felt happy and was feeling better now. he then looked up at the portrait and couldn't help but notice something. Plus, there's a bright side here. He says, gaining Bloom's attention. Like what? Bloom asks, looking at Naruto with a raised eyebrow, wondering what was he talking about. Naruto just points at the portrait, especially, at the woman. I found out where you got your beauty. Naruto says, making Bloom pay close attention to the portrait and see that she and her mom did have similarities to each other. Your mom, she has a striking resemblance to you. If she was this appealing, then that means you'll be like her or even more when you're older. He says, he doesn't see Bloom looking down as a massive blush appears on her cheeks. Why you think so? Bloom softly asks as she discreetly looks up at Naruto and sees him nod, making her look back down as she sheepishly smiles. That's nice to hear, thank you for the compliment. She says, feeling butterflies in her stomach, while her thoughts were running wild. He thinks I'm appealing. She yells in her mind. As she was thinking, the castle starts to shake, alerting them. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 11. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Pixel's fanbook on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.